And so what I look at from a naturopathic perspective and family medicine perspective is we have 75 trillion cells that make up the human body. Some 60,000 miles of blood vessels which deliver nutrients to every one of those cells no further than 1/500th of an inch from each one of those little cells. So the question is, how are we delivering those nutrients? Many of us are taking vitamins, minerals, nutrients, but are we absorbing them? What was educational to me was my two boys, they're 10 and 14, were watching Nickelodeon, the cartoon channel. And we were driving along and they started educating me about flatulence. Apparently Nickelodeon decided to focus on flatulence. And they said there's two types of flatulence. There's the smelly kind and there's a loud thunderous kind. So I'm listening to this little conversation, captive audience driving in my car. And indeed there are two types of flatulence. The silent deadly kind, as my sons would call it, and that's putrefaction. Do we really have in our colon a rotting process? We know the transit time of the colon, 12 to 14 hours typically to see something start passing through, and up to 72 hours or longer. My patients come in, I say, well, are your bowels regular? We have our little intake form, and they say, oh, regular. I says, well, tell me a little bit more about your bowels. And they say, well, I'm regular. I says, well, tell me more about your bowels, because as a doctor, I'd like to know more about your bowels. And I says, well, I go about every 3 or 4 days, and I have a bowel movement. And the record, by the way, is every 2 weeks. I had a patient say, oh, yeah, I go regularly every 2 weeks. Regular is a relative term. Of course, we know anybody that's ever had children, you feed a child, they go potty. It's called a gastrocolic reflex. We get busy, we get stressed, we stop making time. And or it's not socially acceptable to eliminate the toxins and waste out of our bodies. Now, if you've ever drank tap water, you've drank chlorinated water. And as a result, what happens? If chlorine's good enough to kill the bacteria in the communal swimming pool, after all that, they used to be called bathing suits, right? Before they became swimwear. Chlorine is good enough to kill the bad microbes. What is it doing to the friendly flora in your colon? And I ask my patients, when was the last time you took an antibiotic? And of course we think, well, when was the last time my doctor prescribed me a drug, which AKA was an antibiotic? But when was the last time we ate animals-fed antibiotics? The higher we eat it up on the food chain, of course, the more things we're going to consume. So today we're going to discuss proactive steps to taking care of our GI health and strengthening them. So some statistics. 60 to 70 million people have overt diagnosable digestive diseases. Annually, an astounding 234,000 people die of GI problems. And some 14 million people end up in the hospital. It's not just diarrhea, diverticulitis. And I have one patient, for example, she's been in a hospital 3 times this year from C. diff, secondary from her diverticulitis and antibiotic treatment. If she had just been given a probiotic ahead of time, may she have shifted the benefit of maybe not having as many GI problems by just a friendly probiotic, acidophilus, another probiotic. And the answer is certainly, we know that from the literature for decades now. Antibiotic-induced diarrhea is huge. So tens of millions of people suffer from GI problems. Of course, we all know the term irritable bowel syndrome. My question is, why is the bowel irritated? So it's either diagnosable, it's either celiac or Crohn's or colitis or something else going on, and we've labeled it irritable bowel, or their bowels are irritated. Why are their bowels irritated? That's one of the questions which we're going to address today. When our bowels are not functioning, we're not going to nourish the 75 trillion cells in our body. We're going to decrease the ability for our vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and even drug therapy from working. We know that if a person's had an acute diarrheal episode, maybe a viral enteritis, their propranolol, their beta blockers, propranolol, Lipitor, maybe their other drugs, are all going literally through their bowels very, very quickly. They're going to have malabsorption. They're not going to have maximal drug therapy. Likewise, are we absorbing our vitamins? If we're constipated, what happens to our bowels? Our stool becomes harder. It becomes firmer. It becomes drier. Well, what happened to all that moisture? I'm going to share in a moment an interesting factoid that 90% of all the moisture from the small intestine going to the large intestine gets reabsorbed. Well, of course, we know all the blood goes to the liver from the intestinal tract. So if we're working with a person with liver disease, might you want to look at the colon first? Maybe they have HEP. Maybe they have liver dysfunction or detoxification issues. Maybe you want to chelate them, but now they're slower bowel function. Maybe they have permeability issues. Are we really going to do them any favor by detoxifying them before we help with that permeability issue in their colon? And the answer is probably not. In fact, you're going to see a lot more aggravation and, of course, symptomologies. So also interesting, just like with the oral health, the gums, major contributing factor to C-reactive protein, an independent risk factor for heart disease. We know that. You want to be below 1. I've had patients as high as 19, 20. Right now I have a patient that has a little over 500 CRP. Measurable. Documented again and again and again. He happens to have cancer. But a lot of my patients walk around with 16s, 18s. Look at any of your autoimmune patients when they're actually having a flare. There's a lot of inflammation. But what's happening in our colons? Remember, lots of irritable bowel going on and lots of subtle colitis and celiacs. And many of you know that a person may have all the signs of being, quote unquote, messed up from eating wheat or gluten, but they're not diagnosable. They don't have overt celiac disease. The antibodies aren't there, but they're feeling pretty miserable. They eat wheat, they feel crummy. So the colon, about 5 feet. Small intestine, about 4 to 5 times longer than that. And this little part of our body, hopefully we've all had colonoscopies that we've been 50 or above. And of course, if we have colon cancer, of course, we hopefully do that 10 years sooner than that. But the key is being proactive versus reactive. 6 million diagnostic and therapeutic procedures each year in the U.S. and 1.9 million people actually diagnosed disabled due to GI problems. Disabled. So the question is, what prevents a person from becoming disabled? So they're walking along and all of a sudden one day they step off the curb, they can break their ankle, they can break a femur. But did that colon problem just sneak up on them? Most likely not. So the question is, how many of our patients are walking around with a predisposition, a susceptibility to GI problems, and we just haven't figured it out yet? A lot of them. So over the last 15 years, I see patients coming in with Crohn's disease, and I love it when they walk out and their Crohn's disease is in long-term remission. And it's something as simple as avoiding a food allergen or giving them some glutamine to help feed their colon. And we're going to talk about those nutrients today. So the large intestine absorbs 90% of the water, the moisture. So I call it, for my patients, absorbing muddy water. If you're not having 2 to 3 good bowel movements a day, your stools are harder. You reabsorb estrogens, hormones, toxins, metabolites, bacterial endotoxins. So once again, you have to eliminate. How do you do that? Fiber, of course, exercise, water, hopefully more fruits and vegetables. The statistics from the journal Preventive Medicine, 2007, said that only 11% of us consume our fresh fruits and vegetables. 11% of us. That means 89% of us don't. That includes us as doctors, let alone our patients. So once again, slow bowels mean that you're going to reabsorb toxic material. So healthy colon, healthy us. And we have to look at the lining of that colon. We feed our bodies CoQ10 to help the heart. What have we done for our colon lately? Have we fed it glutamine or inositylglucosamine or gamma-oryzanol or some friendly probiotics to replace the things that are being decimated on a daily basis? Most likely not. So we have to look at a healthy colon. Otherwise, the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients you're giving to your patients and to yourselves most likely aren't going to be maximally absorbed. So we all the time are looking as physicians to looking at what is the best product out there. Well, how about finding the best product and then let's get the maximum absorption out of that product? And that's, of course, the key. Our mucosal lining of our colon replenishes itself every 3 to 8 days. It can only do that with proper building blocks. Research shows that people with irritable bowel syndrome have up to a 3-fold more rapid turnover of their colon lining. So they're going to need more nourishment. Likewise, if you have a diet that's sometimes a little lackluster, maybe you have some diarrhea, which flushes out your probiotics, or you drink tap water, or you take antibiotics as needed. Once again, you're going to be wiping things out from your colon. We also know that if you don't have enough mucus coating, your secretory IgA levels, even if you're not stressed, aren't going to be there. Secretory IgA, of course, that nice, wonderful Scotch guard, as I call it for my patients, of the immune system, the mucous membranes, has to have some mucus, some fluidity. Otherwise, it's like spraying onto a porous surface. Scotch guard's not going to work. The secretory IgA is not going to work. And for those people wanting to increase secretory IgA, of course, not only stress reduction, but proprietary and non-proprietary products can actually be very beneficial. And I can talk about that later. So proper